Oh, hi. Just finished this shed floor here, as you can see. It's pretty awesome. Now, real talks. This shed floor is exactly the same size as the shed floor that I built before. The difference being it is a different design. It's still a floating style, but this is a much better shed floor if you have an uneven yard or a slope surface or something like that that you're trying to build this on. This shed floor would be better. So if you want to build the other shed, go check that series out. But you wanted this floor, you can swap the floors between them. Now there will be plans for this, probably not until I'm finished the rest of the entire shed series, but they'll be coming. So check out how I built it. Step one of the floor frame is we need to actually build the rough outer box of the floor frame. Now I'm cutting a couple of floor joists down here to length, but don't worry about that right now. We'll get into that later. This is mostly right now just so we have a reference of once it's sitting in place, kind of where we need to start excavating. Now off camera in the days leading up to this, we had already removed an old steel shed and an old flower bed that used to be here, and we just leveled out the ground is all we've done so far. That's about where that's going to sit. With the frame sitting in place, we can start marking around the corners of where we're actually going to dig out. Yeah, but we want to go a bit bigger, so I'm going 2 shovelfuls wide. Now the reason we're going that wide is so we have lots of extra space once our stone is down, so that way we can slide the frame around and make sure it's sitting exactly where we want later on. But for now, we need to dig out about 4 to 6 inches down, depending on how hard your ground is. The harder it is, you don't have to dig down quite as far. But the more base you have, the better. Now for our base, we're going to be using this stuff here. This is 3/4 inch to 1 inch natural crushed stone, and it compacts really well. Now if you have something like limestone screenings or something called pack, those are also really good options, but you want to fill the entire hole back up to level or even just slightly above level to the ground if you can. Then on top of the stones, I'm going to be setting the frame on some 4-inch thick blocks. Now there's a bunch of different style of blocks you can get. There's composite ones, there's these concrete ones, doesn't matter, but a nice big sturdy block on top of the rock. All right, now the beauty of this foundation is that making adjustments is super easy. For us, as soon as we put it on here, I didn't have to throw a level on it. We knew we were out of whack. It was really low in that corner, it was out left to right, so not a big deal. If you need to make small adjustments, what you can do is just take and add some more stone to the corners where you need it. If you need to make a large adjustment, lift up the patio stone or the block that we're going to use to set the foundation on, slide a patio stone underneath that. That'll pick it up 1 inch, 2 inches, even 4 inches, depending on the size of block you get. If you need to go up really high, cinder blocks standing on end work great. So if you have a huge slope in your yard, this is a great foundation to counteract and fight the slope. For us, we just got to add some more rock. Between the rocks and the blocks, you want to have enough material so that once the frame is installed, it's going to be about 2, maybe 3 inches ideally off the ground. This way the wind can blow up underneath there freely, keeps everything nice and dry, and we don't hold moisture and harbor rot. Doing it this way will ensure the floor is going to last a really long time, decades upon decades, so you're not going to have a problem. Okay, I'd love to say we planned this, but it couldn't get more perfect if I tried. The other ones, however, not so much. Now I'm just checking for square, and it's not so much to make sure that the frame is square, it's just to make sure that the blocks underneath are actually going to be sitting close to where their final resting place is going to be. Perfect, 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 perfect. You got to say that. After a brief pause from the rain, we're back. Now we need to cut all of our floor joists to length. The reason we have to cut them to length is because we have our front and rear rim joists. We're also going to have a second front and rear rim joist. I can talk. So I want the outside dimension of the long or the short walls here to be full 8 feet. once the shed is built. So I have to take off the width of my front and rear rim joists as well as my wall sheeting. So we got to cut our floor joists to length. The 10-foot walls I haven't touched. It is a full 10 feet still. So we just got to cut the floor joists to length. With all the floor joists cut to length, now we can lay out our basic framing marks. So technically I should have probably done this first because I could have marked the front and the back at the exact same time. Not a big deal, we'll just do them individually. Now we're just gonna use basic 16-inch on center framing. Now if you've never done this before, quick overview, pull out your tape measure and we're just gonna stretch it across the entire length. Now, most good tape measures are gonna have your 16-inch marks, 16, 32, 48. They're all going to be marked in red, so it's pretty simple. Now we want our joist to fall 16 inches on center. So what we're going to do is you can go 15 1/4 or 16 3/4, doesn't matter, it depends on how you want to do things. I like to go 16 3/4 and make a mark. Then on the back side of it, where the 16-inch mark is, I'm going to make an X. Now this is where my stud is going to go, or my floor joist in this case. And then we're going to go over here to 32 3/4 and then mark on the back side. The reason we're going 3/4 of an inch past or early, because our joist is 1.5 inches wide, so 3/4, that's half of that. That makes sure we fall right on center. All right, now once we get to this end, you're gonna notice that one of our joists is going to fall right here. And you may think because we're so close to the edge, I'll just stretch that out. Even though we've got one right here, you're still gonna put a stick here. Just don't skip it. Everything falls 16 inches on center. It's just good practice. Now I got to mark out this rear rim joist. So to make sure that all my measurements from here are the same as that one, I'm going to pull my measurements from the exact same side. Okay, now let's talk fasteners. In the last shed video, I could get away with using screws on all of my joists. Now the reason being is because I had a 4x4 beam that my rim joist and the floor joist were sitting on the entire way across. This time, we're only supported in the corners. So, because the centers are going to be floating, we need to use nails. Now why is that? If you're not 100% sure, the difference between screws and nails have a higher shear strength, whereas screws are very weak in the shear, but have good clamping force. So, because we're gonna be floating, we gotta throw out our shoulder with the old beating iron and pound some nails in. Now, if you have a nail gun, well, good on you, but a lot of us don't, so shoulder time it is. Now, how many do you need? Well, you need 1 fastener per every 2 inches. Now, because we're using a 2x8, we need 4 fasteners. If you had a 2x6, you need 3, so on and so forth. Now we can get away with swapping out one of the nails for a screw. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna drive in one of my center fasteners is going to be a screw. That'll help clamp the whole thing together so I can pound my nails in afterwards. So it's gonna be 3 nails, 1 screw per joist on both sides. Now how long do you go? That's the other question. Typically, you want your fastener to be minimum of twice the thickness of what you're going through. Now in this case, because we're going through 1.5 inches, we need a minimum of 3 inch. You can go longer than that, you just don't want to go shorter. So I've got 3.5s here in both versions of nails and screws. That's what we're going to use. So I guess we better get to it. I actually got a little ahead of myself. The final thing we got to watch is the crown of the board. And what's the crown? The crown is basically, if you stare down the length of the board, it's either going to bow up or bow down. The reason we want the crown up is because you want to be pushing against the strength of the board. If we install it crown down, well, you're already installing a sag into your floor and you don't want that. It also might have a bit of a bounce to it. And if we install some boards crown up and some boards crown down, well, it's just going to be wobbly. And who wants a wobbly floor? All right, now I don't know if you can see it. It's really hard. These are probably the straightest boards I've ever seen. I'm not complaining, it's just really rare. But this guy is crown up right now. So if I flip it over, you can kind of see there is a very, very slight dip. Right now, it's a slight hump. And that's what we're looking for. If you want to check the entire pile beforehand, go ahead and do that. Take a pencil and mark which side the crown is up. That way you can't mistake them, and then you can lay them all out. And this is why I like the idea of a clamping force with the screw. Pull them together. Our rim joist here has a bow out. So I think the back one has a bow out as well. So it creates a big void. So when we put the screw in, it's actually going to pull the whole thing together for when we pound our nails in. I made a bit of an oopsie daisy. The screws that I put in should have been treated or coated. These ones are ceramic coated, doesn't matter. Rated for ACQ or pressure treated wood. The ones I put in were straight deck screws and those will rust out. The nails are hot dip galvanized, those are fine, but I gotta switch out all my screws. Uncoated, coated. Oh God, it's way heavier now.
All right, so with all the joists installed, you can finally set the frame in place and figure out exactly where it's going to sit from here on out. And then we can finally go ahead and install our secondary front and rear rim joists. And you want to install these to the first rim joists with the exact same amount of fasteners used to hang the joists themselves.
All right, now the final thing we got to do before we put our sheeting on is we got to install our joist hangers. Now we got to put one on every single joist going down on both sides, minus the outside two. Now these basically just saddle up underneath the joist and hold the joist to the rim joist. There's angle holes on here that pull the two together, as well as some face holes. Now I'm going to use a combination of structural screws as well as nails on these guys because I don't have enough structural screws and they're really expensive, especially compared to nails. And I want to save some of these for the hurricane ties for the roof. You'll see that later. And because I don't have enough, I'm going to split the difference and use some screws, some nails. Plus, I just don't feel like pounding in that many nails, so almost done. Oh, one more thing. These do come with the bit inside to install them, and these can be used anywhere you need to swap out nails for screws. They actually have the same shear rating, so we're good there. Oh my gosh, I gotta pull off these tags before the internet gets mad at me. Like last time. There. Now we need to install our floor sheeting, and this is 3/4 inch tongue groove OSB. And yes, this is the same stuff I used in the previous shed, and it works just fine if you use it correctly. I got roasted. This is probably the biggest point of contention in the last shed. But I'm going to show you why I like this stuff, but I mean, there are no hard and fast rules here. If you want to use pressure treated plywood, go for it. This is just what I use. So let's get into the shed. Okay, now that's the side that I pulled all my measurements from my floor joist. So 16 inches on center starting in the back corner. I've got my tongue side facing up. My groove side is going to be facing back. Now, there's a dark side and a light side to these sheets. This is the dark side. It says this side down. This is the side that's slightly more weather resistant, which is why we're going to put it down. That way, any humidity in the air, it's not going to bug this. But remember, this isn't going to get wet. Because we've got this air gap underneath our joists, our sheet never actually gets wet. We're not harboring moisture and promoting rot because we're allowing wind to blow up underneath this. So that's the reason this is going to last. Now, I'm going to flush it up to this back corner here. I'm going to show you another reason why I like this stuff. If you notice, every single place of the joist, we have a line. And that's so you know where to put your fasteners in through the sheet. Now this tongue is going to slot into the groove on the next sheet that's going to go in front of this, and that's going to lock the two sheets together, and it's going to be a lot stronger between the joists where the sheets are. So you're not going to have the sheets moving independently and potentially flexing, getting weak, soft, spongy, or squeaky over time. This is just going to be much stronger. And here you see the benefits of how basic construction works. All your materials are designed to work together. So this sheet and the sheet beside it are going to share this joist. So you have to drive your screws in a bit of an angle, but because they share this joist, it makes the edges very strong.
Now I'm going to show you how we're going to square the frame up. So take the sheet and flush up the back corner where you pulled your measurements from, and don't worry about the front side yet. Pin that corner of the sheet down with an 1.5 inch long treated screw. Go to the long side, flush it up, and pin that side down. Now we can knock the front end of the frame over until it's flush with the edge of the sheet, and then we know that the frame is nice and square. And to keep the frame square, we're going to drive a couple of screws towards the front end of the sheet, but not all the way to the front, just up a little bit. This way we're going to keep the tongue loose. That way it's a little bit easier to slot the tongue and groove together because you can wobble them around a little bit. When I install the second sheet, I'm going to install it slightly offset of the first. This way it staggers the joints, a little bit more strength. But you'll notice that the sheet marker lines on the first sheet and the second sheet will line up perfectly with each other, and they'll both share joists on that end as well as this end. But once you've got the sheets actually sitting in place, go ahead and pin the corners.
Alright, so this is our next sheet that's supposed to go on. I'm going to show you that these materials are supposed to work together. Now, if I just stand on this right now, you can see here that this sheet will butt up to this one. Our next line is right in line with this joist. And then we have another line right here. This is for a 10-foot span. So we can take and chop this sheet off just beside this line, and this section will fit right in. And we can do the same with that corner over there.
Now before I cut the sheets, I'm going to make sure the depth of my saw blade just barely comes through the bottom of these sheets, and this is going to come in handy for when we trim the front. Now after snapping a chalk line on top that's flush with our frame on the bottom, we can go ahead and trim the front off. And this is why we wanted our saw blade to just barely come through, because if you do manage to get into your floor joist framing, that's not really going to damage anything. And because the whole internet asked for it last time, I swear, the whole internet. Here's a cost breakdown of what it cost me to build the shed in Canada. Now keep in mind, this can vary wildly depending on where you're at, but here you go.
That's it. The floor is done. What the heck was that? Some kind of bug attacked me. Oh man. Anyway, it's hot. Slade's over there laying in the shade. I'm done. I'll see you guys in the next video. If you want to support the channel, there's plans for the other shed available. You can build one for yourself. Plans for this shed won't be available until I'm done the entire series, but they will be coming. And you can build a fancy shed of your own, and that will support the channel. If you guys want to do other things to support the channel, there's a donate, thumbs up, thanks button thing down below, and channel membership. That's available too if you want. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the wall video. Later.